Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Good evening. Today is Black Monday, the day the Dow dropped more than 500 points.
Please join me in welcoming George Soros.
It's panic. Everyone's at war. Everybody would try to find a bottom.
To stand up and do something, become really engaged in the electoral process in this country.
What we have to confront is a deep, systemic, and structural restructuring of our world. And this will take some time. And the world will look differently after we have gone through this transition process.
For centuries, they've been stuffing their stomachs with human flesh, and they've been stuffing their pockets with money. But they must realize that this bowl of vampires is about to end.
We have an army of digital soldiers.
That this is coming. This is going to be a part of a future where we can take back our power in ways we didn't even think about in the industrial age that are coming in the digital age.
But the common people of these countries in their heart, they can feel what's happening. They can see our struggle for our independence, for our true sovereignty. And they see this connection with their aspirations to be truly independent, which is exacerbated by the fact that in the Western elites there is a strong desire to freeze the current unfair state of things in international affairs.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next President of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let TrumpaMania run wild, brother. Let TrumpaMania rule again. Let TrumpaMania make America great again.
People who don't believe are walking dead. They are asleep. And this is the awakening.
Is there anybody in corporate America who knows the Saudis as well as you do?
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of people, but I started as a young pup under their tutelage, and it was quite amazing to see today probably $22 trillion worth of investment capacity in the terms of individuals who are managing money around the world, all grouped together
Here
here
at the Future Investment Initiative
in Riyadh, which is epic.
It is a sign of the times in many respects. Tom, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, has a plan to transform not just the Saudi economy, but the Saudi society. And I don't need to tell you, given your experience, how ambitious that plan is. What's the most difficult part? Because to me, they all seem difficult.
First of all, he's an amazing young man. And the most difficult part, I think, for sure, is cultural. If you think back in 1970, Saudi Arabia was 2 million people, and oil was $2 a barrel. And the culture, a monarchy, was based upon a family unit, and that family unit was a combination of a Bedouin culture that had really existed for thousands of years. So the Bedouin culture was free of all of the elements of a normal commercial civilization. There was trade, but it was limited. And the purity of Islam, denoted by Mecca and Medina, gave them a special place in the world as the guardian of something very sacred and very pure. So in this necessity of diversifying from an oil-based economy, which you've talked about all day, the idea of now taking 30 million people, a population which consists half of youngsters and young people, and saying we're going to diversify so that 30 years from now, the necessity of relying on an oil curse at the hands of sometimes the West and sometimes the East will be freed, and we'll have a diversified economy and a future for the youngsters. But the biggest challenge that this young man has, he's so smart, he's so bright, he's so focused, is conveying that vision to his own people in a subtle cadence that they can adjust to.
I know you're
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Book of Trump. I am your host, Gordon McCormick, the ghost of Base Patrick Henry. Tonight is chapter 37, Tom Barrack. And this is, we had a 2-week hiatus from the show. That wasn't planned. It was just life circumstances. Gart last week and the week before, everyone in my house was sick. But so I was planning on doing this episode 2 weeks ago, and then serendipity pushed it back till now. And I think it actually works out better because that clip that I just played for the cold open, I believe was the same clip we played at the beginning of the Crown Prince episode, which, if I'm not mistaken, was like episode, 7, 8, something like that. And it resonates. It resonates very well because here we are on the eve of the big meeting between the Saudi Crown Prince, MBS, and President Trump at the White House tomorrow. They just announced, Barrack just reported, Trump was asked about this during a press conference, but he was asked whether he was going to, you know what? Maybe we should just play the. Why am I sitting here telling you when I can just show you? Let me just show this. Trying to think the quickest way to get it on screen. I'm sorry, I was not planning on showing this, but it's not hard to pull it up. Here it is. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and listen to it.
You're hosting Saudi Arabia. Are you planning to sell F-35s to Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
And also, are you looking at doing a similar security agreement like you did with
No, I am planning on doing that.
You're
They want to buy. They've
F-35s?
been a great ally. They've got to like us very much. Look at the Iran situation, what we did in terms of obliterating, we obliterated their nuclear capability. Yeah, I will say that we will be doing that.
You're hosting Saudi Arabia.
That's a really, really big deal. Not at all surprising to this audience, but this is setting the tone for the whole week. We'll do the analysis on all that tomorrow, all day. I'm probably going to be streaming. I'll be on Breaking History tomorrow morning, and then Geopolitics with Ghost in the afternoon. Just covering the whole day. So exciting stuff. But that, I think, really sets the tone not only for this upcoming week, but for this episode, because it really does demonstrate what Trump says right there, the significance of Mohammed bin Salman. And here is the post that I was making the post about this. I was reposting a New York Post article from a few days ago. This was a narrative that was making the rounds. It had made the rounds in the Israeli press before it made it to the New York Post. But Israel lobbying U.S. to condition the sale of F-35 jets to Saudi Arabia on diplomatic normalization, meaning Saudi Arabia and Israel normalizing. And Saudi's been very clear that that is totally predicated on the recognition of a Palestinian state by Israel and the restoration of the borders of the West Bank to the 1967 conditions pre-Six-Day War. And they're gonna stand firm on that, despite every single analyst says they're gonna capitulate, they're gonna bend the knee, they're gonna sell out the Palestinians, and they're gonna grab the shiny objects that are dangled in front of them. And it's because the analysts don't respect the Saudis. It's because they don't look at them as principled people. They don't think that they're actually going to stand by their word. And they really have, even the really good analysts, the ones who I think do know what they're talking about in most cases, they are not at all reading the tea leaves here properly, and they don't understand MBS. That at the end of the day, I don't think they understand MBS. And when you go back and you listen to the clip that we played in the cold open, very few people, I think, understand the Saudis as well as Tom Barrack. That's what he's known for around corporate America and just around the business community and business environment. And that's really how he gets into this entire story. That's what makes him relevant and gives him his own chapter in the Book of Trump, is because of that relationship. So I was trying to think of the best way to approach this. I want to play the rest of the clip, but before we do, I think maybe it might make sense to kind of walk through a little bit of Tom Barrack's background and go through that, and then we'll come back and play the rest of the clip because it might provide better context. But before we do, let's say thank you to a sponsor, recognize a sponsor, and the first one tonight is Vanman. You know about Vanman taking down big toothpaste with all natural oral care, right? It's the perfect time to grab the dental care bundle to gift. Vanman's tooth powder is loaded with minerals like eggshells and bone, and combined with pulling oils and peppermint aloe mouth rinse, it's truly the ultimate fluoride-free dental hygiene bundle that saves you 25% off the individual prices. And the van never stops. Introducing Vanman's new Pearl Eye Cream and Sweet Onion Shampoo. Head over to badlandsmedia.tv/Vanman to see what's new. That's badlandsmedia.tv/Vanman. All right, and thank you to Vanman. So, Tom Barrack, let's kind of walk through a little bit of his background, which is not easy to learn about. It's not like this isn't a guy who has, a large public profile. There are a lot of billionaires who are out there who have that public profile where there have been documentaries about him. There have been YouTube videos made about him. There have been, there's a lot of like PR to their life. You know what I mean? Tom Barrack doesn't have that. So most of the stuff that we understand about him come from secondhand sources. It comes from appearances he's made where he's in like interviews like that. He's on stage at conferences. People ask him questions about his background. He's giving those questions. A lot of the stuff we know about him comes from those sort of moments, and kind of piecing all of that together to kind of get the big picture is the task at hand. So let's see. Just to give you the hard stats, he was born April 28th, 1947. To two Lebanese Christian immigrants who immigrated from Lebanon to the United States. He was born and raised in Culver City, California. And so I'm not as familiar with the California geography as others, but I'm sure there's plenty of people in the chat who understand the significance or can geolocate Culver City. But the way he explains it, Tom Barrack, is that it's like a modest small town. His parents came over around 1900. His father ran a grocery store. His mother worked as a secretary. The family spoke English, but also conversed in Arabic and French with the grandparents, because I guess the grandparents were also in the United States. So when the parents were speaking to Barrack and his siblings, they spoke English, but when they were speaking with the grandparents, they spoke Arabic and French. And remember, as we discussed on other shows, Lebanon was a French colony. It was a French protectorate. So Lebanon is French, as is Syria, as is the western part of Africa. So if you go there today, you're going to find people who speak French. And so the upbringing gave Tom Barrack, I'm sorry, I'm saying his name Barrack. It's Barrack. Barrack is Barack Obama. Tom Barrack. Exposure to Lebanese culture and language, which was foreshadowing to what would happen later in his life. So he attends the University of Southern California. He earns a bachelor degree, a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1969. He goes on to study law at the USC's Gold School of Law and the University of San Diego School of Law, and receive his Juris Doctor in 1972 from the University of San Diego. So from there, he goes to work for the law firm, this is 1972, of Herbert W. Kalmbach, which was President Richard Nixon's personal attorney. 1972, Nixon is the president, right? The firm sent Barrack, apologies, I'm going to try my best not to call him Barrack, sent Barrack on an assignment to Saudi Arabia, and that becomes kind of like the start of it all. And so the way that Tom Barrack explains this, and I have several videos, but I just don't know if it's worth jumping around to all these videos to have him explain it. But he explains Saudi Arabia in 1972 as a place that is, there's no electricity, there's no telephones. It's very, very primitive. Outside of the palaces, you go to the palaces and they have amenities, but you go outside the palaces, there's really nothing. And this is something that I know from my own personal research into Saudi Arabia. 1961, this would be 11 years before that, King Faisal, at the time was the Crown Prince. Crown Prince Faisal meets in secret with JFK, President JFK, and JFK gives him the advice, hey, and you will never be great. The Saudi royal family will never be great unless your people are great. Take all that money y'all are making off of oil and invest it in your people. And he basically gave him much of advice that when Faisal and his brothers stand up to their older brother, Fahd, and have him step down in 1964, and then the brothers all install, and the reason they stand up to him is because he's incompetent. He was in power for 11 years, and Saudi Arabia was a total mess. So they stand up to him. They say, hey, you need to advocate. And he does. He advocates, and he goes and he lives his life. They don't kill him. They don't do like a coup. They don't do any of that stuff. They just say, hey, we've lost our faith in you. You can't be leader anymore. And that's how, by the way, that's how like Eastern culture and the Middle East culture works, is that you only rule. Your right to rule doesn't come from God. That's a European convention. Your right to rule comes from the tribe. And if the tribe loses their faith in you, then you have to step down and somebody else steps up. It's a true meritocracy. And so they tell him to step down, and then Faisal steps up. And when Faisal becomes king, he implements the 10 points that JFK gave to him. And one of them was to abolish slavery. He abolishes slavery. He creates a healthcare system, publicly funded healthcare system funded by the Saudi royal family, starts to build infrastructure projects, all of that. But 1972, this is all very slow. 1972, all that stuff hasn't been implemented yet. So Tom Barrack is living there. And the way he describes it is he says that there really wasn't a lot to do. He would go to these salons, as they're called. I guess they're kind of like lounges, like coffee shops, like lounges, kind of the equivalent of a bar. But you could imagine it's not exactly the same thing, where you would drink like tea and coffee and whatever. And he would sit there for hours every night, and they would just talk. And they would just sit there and talk and talk and talk. And he said from doing that, he learned patience, because you have to sit there and listen to all the people speak before you get a chance to speak yourself. You're listening to a lot of elders speak, who speak very slow. Everyone there speaking is speaking a different dialect than he's familiar with, because he grew up speaking like a Lebanese dialect of Arabic. a French Lebanese dialect, and these people are speaking a Saudi dialect. And so it's almost like a different language, but he can keep up enough to keep up with it. And through that experience, he learns patience. He learns the culture of Saudi Arabia. He learns how the eclectic nature of it, how tribal politics and tribal culture still very much dominate the Middle East. This is something that he has harped on so many times. And we're going to hear him talk about it in a few of these videos we're going to watch. We are going to watch a fair amount of clips tonight of Tom Barrack, because I think that hearing him in his own words is really powerful to understand his thinking and why he's such a central figure to this story when it comes to the Middle East. But really, the big changing thing is that he's asked to play racquetball, not squash, racquetball. And he's asked to play with this random guy, and the guy he ends up playing with, and he's actually very good at racquetball, apparently. And the guy he ends up playing with ends up being a Saudi prince, and they become very close, and they keep playing, and they become racquetball partners. And from that kind of like, that's like how he becomes introduced to the Saudi royal family. And then that leads to him being introduced to the Emirati royal families and eventually the Qatari royal families. And so he becomes ingratiated with the entire Gulf clans, all these people. And that all kind of ties back to Donald Trump. So before we get to that moment of how does he meet Donald Trump, let's go back to this clip, and we'll go back and watch the rest of the clip that we were watching. Let's see, where was it? Because the other thing he's going to mention in this clip is he's going to mention, the reason I want to play this clip through is because he's going to mention the purchase of Miramax. So in 2010, Tom Barrack put together an investment team, because he starts a company called Colony Capital, which is like a investment firm. And in 2010, he puts together an investment team with Rob Lowe, like the famous actor, and the Qataris, and they buy Miramax from the Weinsteins. And a lot of people look at that and they're like, well, wait a minute. Tom Barrack's doing business with the Weinsteins? He must be a bad guy. He must be a Satanist. He must be. Listen to what he says about that moment, about that transaction, and then I'll give you a little more background once he's done talking. But that's the reason I want this to play through. It's about 10 more minutes of this clip. Let's just listen to the whole thing.
We're betting on him, not just because you want to, because you have to, as a friend, as a supporter.
Before we get there, he's going to finish his thoughts on MBS. And again, this is very relevant because this clip is from 8 years ago, from the first foreign investment initiative, the FII, which is this investment group that MBS started 8 years ago. And we just saw, he just hosted whatever, the 7th or 8th annual one last week, 2 weeks ago in Riyadh. And we saw all of the various world leaders, including Gustavo Petro was the big one. We talked about that last night on the narrative with Burning Bright. That was the FII. So the same thing that we were looking at last night on the narrative, which was Gustavo Petro in Riyadh meeting with MBS. This is the very first iteration of that we're looking at right here 8 years ago with Tom Barrack.
Do you really think he'll succeed?
I do. That the boldness of his vision in his youth came at an amazing time in the world, and all the stars aligned for him. So the opportunity that he has with America's sponsorship, President Trump really embraced his father and him on a very personal level. And Jared Kushner, who helped engineer the first American Arab Islamic summit that was here a few months ago, created a breakthrough in relations, not necessarily economic relations, but just relations. At the same time, the geopolitical situation of the Gulf, which you know is amazingly complex.
And fraught right now.
very, very strained, but strained in a manner that demands leadership from another generation. And amazingly enough, you have it across the Gulf. So you have Mohammed bin Zayed in Abu Dhabi, you have Mohammed bin Salman and his father, the king, here, and you have Sheikh Tamim, the Emir of Qatar. And even though there's a family dispute, my belief is that out of the evolvement of this next generation, discussing issues they've never really discussed before in a family setting, what could come out of it would be a quantum leap.
Tom, this country needs foreign capital if its economy is to evolve beyond oil. That goes without saying. Who's going to invest here while the Saudis are in the midst of this standoff with Qatar?
I'll tell you, I think we'll all invest here. I think today was a great tribute to the fact that if you walk through the halls of this hotel, you think you're in New York City. What's needed is transparency, consistency, a legal system that's understandable, a capital system that's usable.
Neither of those things exist yet.
Not yet, but they're on their way.
Are you still involved in brokering a truce between the Saudis and their allies and Qatar?
No, I've never had an official role. I've always been an advocate of allowing all those great sovereign nations to solve that in their own way, which they will do.
You think it's going to happen?
Yes, for sure it's going to happen. When it's going to happen, I can't tell you. But this has been going on for hundreds of years. Qatar is a sovereign nation. For the viewers who don't know it, is the tip of the peninsula of Saudi Arabia. So the necessity of the Gulf as a unit, taking care of all of its own issues as a unit, is imperative, especially as it confronts Iran and Turkey across the way.
I need to ask you about something, if you will, that's been in the news recently. Last week, you rode to the rescue of the Weinstein Company, the production house that I don't need to tell, maybe I need to tell a few people here, but back home, they all know that it's been rocked by accusations of sexual assault by its co-founder and driving force, Harvey Weinstein. Why did you come to the rescue?
Well, I don't know that we've come to the rescue, but the company itself, if you recall, we purchased Miramax.
I do recall.
From Disney, which
in
was
2010.
Yes. Which was a previous company that the Weinsteins had sponsored. And it was 750 films, 750 projects in the can. It was a great acquisition from Disney. So we were familiar with the portfolio, the library, and the process.
Why do you say you haven't bailed them out or rescued them yet?
Well, and when we say rescue, there's a big difference between the Weinsteins and the company. So Harvey, whatever the accusations are, his conduct was totally unacceptable, reprehensible, and unacceptable on any term. So no one is interested in salvaging a company which would benefit Harvey. However, you have 115 individuals, you have a TV production company, you have an independent film company, you have a distribution company, and which has counterparts that are relying on stability. So in a very short period of time, if the Weinstein element could be removed, if the toxicity of the liabilities that are around it could be addressed, and if the content of the company could continue on in a normal way, there's some value. Whether that can happen or not is a question.
When you say the Weinstein element removed, do you mean Bob as well as Harvey?
Well, Bob, of course, is in a satellite position to this, fortunately or unfortunately. And the benefit of his name is also the detriment of his name. But Bob has been very capable at his own business, which is Dimension. So ring fencing the Weinsteins in whatever manner needs to be done without being punitive to Bob, who at this point in time has no culpability apparently in the process, Nevertheless, the counterparts are going to want the Weinsteins gone, and how that gets done is an issue and a question.
Can you tell at this point whether you're going to buy it or not?
No.
When will you know?
Soon.
Soon. Any idea what it will cost?
You know, we're under a non-disclosure agreement, and of course, you have hundreds of creative people whose lives are in the offing here. I wouldn't venture to.
Well, let's try to put scale it, if you will. Miramax was a $660 million deal.
Yes.
A very big film library with some famous titles. Is this as valuable an asset as that was?
Well, it's hard to say because you have to take liabilities. So you have stated liabilities on the balance sheet that go against mostly the previous library. Then you have attendant liabilities that arise from the acts of Harvey now. Which of those liabilities are attributable to the company on an ongoing basis and which aren't is a Rubik's Cube. Very difficult. Very, very difficult. So the first objective is you have a patient that's dying on the table. You need to revive them and get them to breathe first. If you can do that, then maybe you can see, can they walk? And if they can walk, perhaps you can get them in a race. It's a real issue.
Tom, a recent story in the Washington Post implied, if not stated, that you're losing faith in President Trump on some issues. Are you?
Not at all. Not at all. It was actually quite the opposite. What I was trying to convey in an article, which I did not seek, by the way, a very good reporter, but I did not seek it, is that the constituencies that criticize the president understandably have valid issues at times because some of the issues appear to be unnecessary footfalls.
Some of the things you've pointed to, for example, are immigration, particularly as it concerns Muslim countries like this one?
Yes.
Or others in the Gulf?
Exactly.
And some of the rhetoric the president has used.
Exactly. And if we use the Muslim ban as a great example, look where we are today. Look where you are today. Look where every major financier in the world is today. After the president took a position, which was very harsh in the rhetoric, but in his acts, he's opened an unbelievable canal of tolerance that hadn't been seen before. And that really was my issue.
I see. It's been almost a year, as we both know, since.
I think that's enough of that. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that were covered there, and I'm going to detail and kind of clean up some of the things that they were address all the things that they were talking about because they covered. This guy covered a lot of stuff with Tom Barrack. Colony Capital did not end up purchasing the Weinstein Company. This is late October 2017. This interview is happening. It's actually right before the Saudi royal purge, I believe. And you actually have this article, just to clarify. So Colony Capital injects cash in talks to buy Weinstein Company. This is October 16, 2017. So this is when the guy said last week a big story broke, like you might buy the Weinstein Company. And then he fast forward to, a week later, the lifeline pulled by Colony Capital. So they pretty much what he was stipulating through the deal was that Weinstein and his brother, you had Harvey Weinstein and you had his brother, and they had to basically be completely gone in order for the deal to work. Like cut them out completely or there's no deal. And that was how that situation worked. Now Miramax is a totally different animal. We'll get to Miramax because that was also a Weinstein company, but that he purchased. But we'll circle back to Miramax in a bit. Let's go back to the beginning because I think that is going to be making the most sense. How does Tom Barrack come into Donald Trump's life? Because how does this story begin? That article, that interview we were just watching from the first administration, you have to set the context. Tom Barrack had no role in the administration. Technically, he now he's an ambassador to Turkey. He's the special envoy to Syria, right? But back then, he was the chairman to Trump's 2017 inauguration. So he was the guy who ran the inauguration, the famous inauguration where Trump gives the famous speech. He was the one who organized that entire day. And he was later indicted by the Biden administration for the way he ran that inauguration, and ultimately exonerated of all those charges. But he was accused of all kinds of quid pro quo and all that stuff by the Biden administration in 2021, and 9 felony charges. So this guy has definitely paid a price for supporting Donald Trump, and it's important to keep that in mind. So if we go back to 1985, and I wish there were some visuals I could show, but again, this guy is just not a highly public figure. 1985, the first deal he does with Donald Trump is he sells Donald Trump a 20% stake in Alexander's department store in New York City. That's the first deal they do together. Then you fast forward to 1988, one of the big deals from Donald Trump's life is the Plaza Hotel. And this is relevant because my kids actually just watched Home Alone 2 the other day because they love that movie. And my oldest daughter loves that movie. And of course, the setting for that movie is the Plaza Hotel. And Donald Trump is famously in makes a cameo in the beginning of the movie. So here's an article from 2016 that kind of details that. So let's just look at the article. It says the day Donald Trump called and asked for a one-on-one meeting in the winter of 1988. Wait, make sure I'm sharing my screen. There we go. Make it a little bigger. The day Donald Trump called and asked for a one-on-one meeting in the winter of 1988, Tom Barrack was a relatively newcomer to the high-stakes poker game of New York real estate. He had worked for nearly 2 years for Robert Bass, the Texas billionaire investor, and had played an important role in winning the Plaza Hotel for his boss the year before. Mr. Trump was the country's most quotable and ostentatious financial celebrity, a guy with a jet, a 282-foot yacht, and a fondness for peach-toned marble. But among the people he negotiated with, Mr. Trump had a reputation for both steeliness and finesse. So Mr. Barrack was wary. A mere 4 months after Mr. Bass had taken control of the Plaza, he gave Mr. Barrack the go-ahead to put it up for auction. Mr. Trump was calling to say, in effect, skip the auction. We'll strike a deal, the two of us, right here in my office. Quote, just come over, Mr. Trump said in Mr. Barrack's recollection. Give me half an hour. Mr. Barrack was soon sitting in Mr. Trump's office in Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue. The two had met a few times because Mr. Trump had been angling to acquire the Plaza for years. And that's true. Something Trump always talked about was his dream was to own the Plaza Hotel. That was something he said it was not it was like a sentimental buy for him. It was not a numbers, he wasn't going by the numbers. Now that it was going back on the market, Mr. Trump didn't want to miss out. Quote, how can I live without it? End quote, Trump asked, gesturing to the Plaza, which can be seen from his window just 2 blocks north. It's right in my backyard. You should own it, Mr. Barrack replied, but you're going to have to pay for it. Mr. Trump quickly agreed to a price of slightly more than $400 million. I think the exact price was $410 million, an unprecedented sum for a hotel at the time. Just a few years later, the Plaza wound up in bankruptcy protection, part of a vast and humiliating restructuring of some $900 million of personal debt that Mr. Trump owed to a consortium of banks. Never one for regrets, Mr. Trump today regards the purchase as a triumph. Quote, to me, the Plaza was like a great painting, end quote, he said in an interview in late December. It wasn't purely about the bottom line. I have many assets like that, and the end result is that they are always much more valuable than what you paid for them. How Mr. Trump came to own, operate, and then lose the Plaza reveals a lot about his business style. For decades, Mr. Trump has boasted of his boardroom skills in self-exalting speeches and books. As a frontrunner to the Republican presidential race, he frequently argues that his corner office prowess uniquely suits him to negotiate with world leaders. It's so funny, because this is written 9 years ago, and these people think that they're owning Trump when they make these comments about him. But look where we are 9 years later. He actually is uniquely suited to negotiate with world leaders. So what does this prowess look like up close? In the Plaza tale, Mr. Trump demonstrated both strengths, an ability to charm or strong arm as the occasion required, and weaknesses, a kind of hungry impatience that left him searching for new trophies as soon as one had been acquired. His methods as a political candidate mirror his methods as an executive, say those who have dealt with the latter and seen the former. In fact, the more you know about Mr. Trump's past, the more his run for high office looks like an effort to close the biggest deal of his life. So if we skip ahead to the part where it gets back to Tom Barrack, it says, when Mr. Trump made that call to Mr. Barrack, he was 41 and New York's showiest developer. Then, as now, his braggadocio could sound like a parody of braggadocio. There was, for instance, the moment in 1984 when he told the Washington Post he could handle the United States' side of nuclear arms talks with the Soviets. Quote, it would take an hour and a half to learn everything there is to learn about missiles, he boasted. I think I know most of it anyway. In 1987, he had casinos in Atlantic City, a mansion in Palm Beach, Trump Tower, all the trappings of an up-and-coming tycoon, along with a bestseller, The Art of the Deal. What Mr. Trump lacked was the kind of old money Manhattan landmark that would add prestige to his portfolio. The Plaza, which he had been yearning to buy since his mid-20s, was that landmark. The hotel had opened in 1907, a 19-story French Renaissance chateau with roughly 800 rooms. It billed itself as the world's most luxurious hotel, with over the years its habitués, including F. Scott Fitzgerald, Marlene Dietrich, and Frank Lloyd Wright, who lived there while construction of the Guggenheim Museum was underway. When the Beatles performed on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, they stayed at the Plaza. Mr. Bass came into the possession of the Plaza when he, along with a Japanese corporation, bought its owner, the Westin chain. Mr. Bass was enamored with the hotel's history and cachet, but he had little experience in the hospitality industry. As Mr. Bass pondered the matter, Mr. Barrack, who was based in Manhattan, started to appreciate that the Plaza could fetch an irresistible price. By February 1988, he was readying an auction. It was around that time that Mr. Trump picked up the phone and requested that half-hour meeting with Mr. Barrack at Trump Tower. To understand what happened next, you need to know that in every real estate deal, the two big variables are price and contingencies. The latter come after an initial purchase price is agreed to and are essentially conditions demanded by the buyer after a thorough inspection of the property. A condition could be a problem with the plumbing, the roof, or 1,000 other particulars, and every condition can reduce the price of the property. With a building as old as the Plaza, a proper inspection could take months and include union contracts and an assortment of licenses for food and drink. On the phone, when Mr. Trump asked him to abandon the auction, Mr. Barrack initially thought it was a ploy related to contingencies. Quote, I told him, you're too good, you'll want to buy it, and then it will get tied up in all these contingencies. He said, no, it'll be a real deal. I said, no contingencies. Once in Mr. Trump's office, the haggling began. Mr. Barrack said he expected 10 to 15 participants in the coming auction and an ultimate price as high as $500 million. What if I gave you $390 million today? Mr. Trump asked. Mr. Bass has an offer of $410 million in hand, Mr. Barrack countered. Mr. Trump raised his bid, and they settled on a final price of $407.5 million. Quote, then he did something amazing, Mr. Barrack recalled. Quote, he said, you've owned the property for 4 months. I want you to tell me everything that's wrong with it and how to fix it. I said, we just said no contingencies. He said, this is not in the contract. Nothing in writing. Just tell me what's wrong with the property and how to fix it. In essence, Mr. Trump was telling Mr. Barrack that he trusted him to disclose everything that a team of lawyers and inspectors would typically need at least 90 days to unearth. It was like asking an enemy for a map of a minefield. And by saying, in effect, quote, I'm at your mercy and will believe what you tell me. Mr. Trump was appealing to Mr. Barrack's integrity, which was very disarming. Mr. Barrack thought over Mr. Trump's question for a moment. He had already worked out most of the major problems. Quote, the biggest issue, he told Mr. Trump, is Fannie Lowenstein. He was referring to a woman who might have been in her 80s, who lived by herself in a tiny rent-controlled apartment in the Plaza. With Miss Lowenstein there, reconfiguring the building as a condominium or co-op, which was Mr. Trump's plan, and the only way to justify the $407 million price tag, would be far more difficult. But she had adamantly refused to give up her rent-controlled rights and move to a larger apartment in the Plaza. Quote, I'll do the deal in a week for $407.5 million, Mr. Trump said, and you take care of Fannie Lowenstein. All I want at the closing is to hear that Fannie Lowenstein is happy. Mr. Barrack left the meeting in a daze, both thrilled and anxious. Quote, it was a genius deal for Trump, Mr. Barrack said, because while an auction would have fetched a bigger initial price, it would have been tangled up in contingencies, and he just convinced me to fix everything for him. Mr. Trump had correctly sized up Mr. Barrack, someone who was trying to prove himself and wanted a major coup. Quote, he kind of looked at me and said, I'll make you a star, said Mr. Barrack, who now runs Colony Capital, a real estate investment firm based in Los Angeles with 300 employees. Quote, it's the same talent on display when he gives his political speeches. He reads an entire crowd with the same precision that he reads an individual. For Mr. Barrack, winning over Miss Lewenstein was a project. She knew more about tenant law than any lawyer, and for the next 2 months, the two spoke 4 or 5 times a week. He ultimately offered her an apartment in the plaza that was almost 10 times as large as her studio apartment with a view of Central Park, rent-free for life. Also, new furniture, new dishes, new everything. She grudgingly agreed, but she also wanted a piano. She got a Steinway. And what's funny is that when Tom Barrack tells this story in public, he always says, Donald Trump played me with like a Steinway piano. That's like his line to describe how him and Donald Trump met. And what he's referring to is that right there. The fact that he had to buy Miss Lowenstein a Steinway piano as well as, you know, rent for life for free. That's wild. To Mr. Barrack's amazement, Mr. Trump handled nearly all the negotiations for the plaza himself. Much as Mr. Trump is doing in his current campaign, which is notably lacking in consultants and pollsters, he operated largely by gut instinct. When Mr. Trump did consult outside counsel about the plaza, his instructions were to make as little trouble as possible, no matter how daunting the numbers looked. Quote, he toned me down, recalled Jonathan A. Bernstein, then a lawyer at Dreyer and Traub. He had come to the conclusion that this was a deal he wanted to do, and he was completely aware of the downsides, and my job was to get him the best legal document I could. You don't tell him, are you crazy? You say it's $400 million and $12 million in NOI, or net operating income. Are you okay with that? That's wild. That's a pretty big spread. Once he owned the hotel, Mr. Trump put his wife, Ivana, in charge of renovating it, paying her, as he put it at the time, $1 a year plus all the dresses she can buy. She and a team oversaw a restoration that included new paint, new furniture, and a revival of the major public spaces like the Palm Court Tea Room. The article goes on to explain that whole ordeal. I thought there was one other part in here about Barrack. Yes. Okay. So then because then it brings the Saudis in. The same article, the same moment brings the Saudis in. This is where it gets interesting. Okay, so it goes on to explain the renovation with Ivana. Okay, and it says a few months after the Plaza deal closed, he purchased the Eastern Air Shuttle for $365 million. And in 1990, he opened the Trump Taj Mahal Casino in Atlantic City, which cost $1 billion to build. The Taj Mahal, I'm pretty sure, was like an FBI honeypot for organized crime. I'm pretty sure Trump was an FBI informant, but that's a different chapter of the book of Trump. We haven't gotten there yet. Some of the loans he took out to pay for the deals were personally guaranteed. Quote, the fact is you do feel invulnerable, Mr. Trump told Timothy O'Brien, author of Trump Nation, discussing this period in his life. Quote, and then you have a tendency to take your eye off the ball a little bit and hunt around for women and hunt around for models. A lack of focus was not Mr. Trump's only problem. The updraft in real estate market of the 80s turned into a headwind by the early 90s, and more than $3 billion in loans, $900 million of which were personally guaranteed, went into default. Dozens of banks came calling, and after lengthy negotiations, a meeting was held in a large conference room in the law offices of Whale, Gottschall, and Manges, the firm that represented the largest lender, Citibank. There, some 50 bankers and lawyers watched Mr. Trump sign over nearly all of his properties, the plaza, other buildings, the shuttle, the yacht, the jet, in exchange for more favorable terms on his personal guarantees. The banks could have easily toppled Mr. Trump into personal bankruptcy, but we all agreed that he'd be better off alive than dead, said Alan Pomerantz, then head of the real estate department at Wheel. Quote, we needed him to help sell all of his assets, and the deal was that As he sold off more, we'd reduce his personal guarantee. In effect, the banks allowed Mr. Trump to remain solvent so that they could get the benefit of his gift for salesmanship. In exchange, the banks provided him with $450,000 a month to operate his business and cover personal expenses. It was so tight a leash that when Marla Maples, his girlfriend at the time, turned up on television waving the costly Harry Winston diamond she'd been given as an engagement ring, the paymasters wanted the word with the groom-to-be. I didn't buy it, Mr. Trump said, according to Ms. Pomerantz. It was a 3-month loaner given in exchange for on-air mentions of Harry Winston. A spokeswoman for Mr. Trump called that story completely false. The bank shopped the plaza around without success for a few years before finally selling it in a deal that valued it at $325 million to a partnership between Prince Al-Walid bin Talal of Saudi Arabia and CDL Hotels International of Singapore in 1995. None of the proceeds went to Mr. Trump, according to several people involved. I want to repeat that. The banks sold the plaza that Trump owned. This was like the thing that Trump always wanted to own in his life, to Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, Prince Dopey of Saudi Arabia, right? That was 1995. It says, still, he told me that the sale was yet another victory. The terms were, to use one of his favorite words, fantastic, and relieved him of a vast personal debt. Quote, one of the great deals was the plaza because way beyond the price, I was able to get favors from the banks and from others, he said, speaking of Prince Al-Walid. He added, quote, he paid too much for the hotel. He wanted that hotel so badly, and I put him through the ringer and made a great deal. Of course, it cost the Saudi-Singapore partnership $75 million less than Mr. Trump had spent for the same building 7 years earlier. Mr. Trump also claimed in the interview that he owned 100% of the plaza until the day it was sold, a version of events totally at odds with published reports at the time and the recollections of others involved in the deal. This may be yet another parallel to Mr. Trump's performance on the Houstings, where he has bent the troops in so many outlandish shapes that PolitiFact anointed his entire campaign of 2015 a lie of the year. Okay, so we'll just skip ahead to it says Mr. Trump's prediction that the plaza would be worth far more than it cost him did come true. Unfortunately for him, it happened in 2004 when the hotel was sold yet again, this time for $675 million to an Israeli developer who carved up the rooms in the way that Mr. Trump had originally imagined. Half the building was turned into condominiums, which eventually sold for a total of $1.4 billion. Feuding with the prince. So now we're going to go back to Al-Walid bin Talal. And this is going to come full circle, by the way, to Tom Barrack. It says, today, Mr. Trump's brief ownership at the plaza is one of the least known chapters of a protean career. It was not the last time one of his properties would need the shelter of bankruptcy protection, and it marked the beginning of his transition from an owner of major assets to a manager of major assets. An increasing share of his wealth would come in the future from licensing his name, not just to builders, but sellers of suits, cologne, chandeliers, mattresses, and more. And in professional parlance, he went from asset heavy to asset light. The plaza deal has also demonstrated both his intense drive and ambition, as well as his tendency to spread himself dangerously thin as he looks for other conquests. Abraham Wallach, a former executive at the Trump Organization, said Mr. Trump was a man without any conventional vices, but he had a hopeless addiction to notoriety and was always prowling for another deal that would gain attention and enhance his status. Sorry about that. Let's see. Quote, I've been shocked that he has demonstrated such focus during the presidential campaign, Mr. Wallach said. In business, he would focus for about an hour for about 2 or 3 days before the closing, and after that, he would lose interest. End quote. Recently, the hotel and a central character in this narrative have intersected with his presidential run after Mr. Trump called in December for a complete shutdown on Muslims' entry into the United States. Prince Al-Walid posted on Twitter, quote, you are a disgrace not only to the GOP, but to all America. Withdraw from the U.S. presidential race as you will never win. Mr. Trump returned fire. Quote, dopey Prince Al-Walid bin Al-Walid Talal, that's his Twitter handle, wants to control our U.S. politicians with daddy's money. Can't do it when I get elected. That same day, December 11th, Mr. Trump gave a speech at a luncheon where he was heckled by protesters waving signs that read, "Stop the war on immigrant communities," and "Trump making America hate again." Several people were ejected from the building. The building was the Plaza Hotel. That's pretty funny. And there's a picture, of course, of Prince Ali bin Talal. So what's interesting is that bin Talal has a relationship with Tom Barrack. So Tom Barrack has this relationship with bin Talal. He has relationships with many Saudi royal family members, as you can imagine. And when we jump ahead, so we jump ahead to the 2000s, because you get, let's see, I'm going to pull up the timeline. I have a timeline written down of the Kushners. So then the Kushners come in, okay? And it's worth pointing out that, as that article explains, it's almost like Trump was testing Tom Barrack, where he said, "You tell me, just on your word, what's wrong with the building. Tell me what's wrong with the building. You know, like, obviously I can't hold anything against you if you lie to me, but obviously I'm never going to trust you again if you lie to me." And not only did Tom Barrack give it to him straight, he went and solved the problem, which was Mrs. Lowenstein. And so from that point forward, Trump and Tom Barrack become very, very close, and they do other deals together. And then I believe Fred Trump dies in 1999. I think it's 1999. So Fred Trump dies on June 25th, 1999, at the age of 93. And it's Tom Barrack who comes and consoles Donald Trump. And is, you know, the way that Donald Trump has done that for so many people, like, he's known for calling and checking in on people when they lose their wife, or they lose a parent, or they lose someone close to them. He's always the guy who puts his arm around the person and helps them. Steve Witkoff is a perfect example. Steve Witkoff's 21-year-old son dies of an opioid overdose, and Donald Trump's the one who gets him through that period, very rough period in his life. And that is why Steve Witkoff is now completely loyal to Donald Trump. Tom Barrack did the same thing for Donald Trump, which is why Donald Trump is totally loyal to Tom Barrack. That's just how it works. Donald Trump has talked about how he's all about loyalty, specifically in the Charlie Rose 1992 interview, where he is talking about this era of his life, the late 80s, when he had to file for bankruptcy. He lost everything, and quote unquote lost everything, and said that all these people that he thought were going to be there for him weren't there for him and wanted nothing to do with him. And he's like, man, I really learned like who my real friends were and the value of loyalty and all that stuff, right? Okay, so that brings us up to the 2000s. So in the 2000s, we get Jared Kushner. So Charles Kushner and the Kushner companies are Charles Kushner is arrested for tax evasion and campaign finance stuff in, I think it was 2004, 2005. I don't have all the details of what was going on, like politically, but it seems like it was a New York politics situation. It seems like it was, he put a bunch of money into somebody's campaign, and then the people who didn't like this particular candidate went after Kushner. And then Chris Christie of New Jersey, who was the attorney general, ends up prosecuting him, puts him in prison for 2 years. He gets out in 2007. This is Charles Kushner. And Charles Kushner, Jared at that point had to step up and take over the Kushner company. And then they decide that they're going to purchase, at Jared's urging, they purchased the 666 Fifth Avenue building, which is an office tower in Midtown Manhattan. This is January 2007 for $1.8 billion. And this is at like the very top of the market. Okay, because the market crashes in 2008, but this is at the very top of the real estate market. It was they invest $500 million cash, and then they cover the rest with debt. And it was the highest purchase price ever paid for a New York office tower. So then a few things happen that really is bad for the Kushners, but the number one thing that happens is Citigroup announces that they are going to not be renewing their 75,000 square feet that they have leased at 666 Fifth Avenue. And why they weren't renewing it, there's a million reasons why you wouldn't renew it, but that makes the property considerably less valuable because you don't have that money coming, that rent coming in. And so that, along with, I'm sorry, I thought I was sharing my screen, but here's that headline: Citigroup skipping out on, this is from 2007, skipping out on 75,000 feet at 666 Fifth Avenue. And so, and the date there is December of 2007. This is right before 2008. And then in 2008, the Kushners go and they sell 49%. Let me get this article archived because I'm trying to put it behind a paywall. Okay, so here's an article from the New York Times. This is from 2012. And it talks about the Kushner Company's purchase of 2007 of 666 Fifth Avenue, an aluminum-clad office tower in Midtown Manhattan for a record price of $1.8 billion, is considered a classic example of reckless underwriting. And then it goes on to explain how they basically get out of it, right? Surviving a big risk. So this is worth, I think, walking through a little bit. But before we do, let's. So 2011, I'll just give you like the high level. 2010, Kushner Company's $1.2 billion loan on 666 Fifth Avenue is transferred to a special servicer to try to restructure the debt after the Kushners reported difficulties in paying the loan. The building is appraised for $820 million, which is less than half of what they paid for it in 2007. And it's also less than the debt that they owe to the banks. Because remember, they bought it for $1.8 billion. They put $500 million in cash, and then they financed the $1.3 billion, which at that point was $1.2 billion, and then it only appraises for what, $820 million. So they're $400 million short of what they owe the bank. So it says the Kushners then sell. Let's see, 49% were sold in 2008, and it said to Carlyle Group and Crown Acquisitions for $525 million, and then they sell nearly 50% of the building's office space to this company called Vornado as part of a refinancing deal on the loan for the building. Okay, and then that leads to 2015, the Qataris getting involved. And so we'll get to the Qataris in a minute, but let's just look at this article, and it'll explain a little bit about Vornado. And so let's see. Vornado. Yeah. So instead of foreclosing on the 39-story building, which stretches from 52nd Street to 53rd Street, the lenders agreed last month to reduce the principal and defer some of the interest payments on the interest-only loan and extend its maturity for 2 years until February 2019. In exchange, Kushner and its powerful new partner in the deal, Vornado Realty Trust, agreed to pour tens of millions of dollars into the building to improve its leasing prospects. The 1.5 million square feet office building is currently 30% vacant. So basically what this deal does is it just buys them time. Like, okay, you have now more time to figure out how you're going to fix this problem, but you're not out of the woods yet. All you're doing is you're just buying yourself time, but you still need to figure out how to get out of this hole that you're in, because they're in a big hole. They're $400 million short of money they owe the banks. And if they foreclose, then the banks are going to come collect that $400 million one way or another, right? So that leads to 2015, when the Qataris get involved. And so President Trump picks up the phone and he calls Tom Barrack, and he says, Tom, I need my daughter's husband, Jared needs help. We need some investors. Help us out. So Tom Barrack picks up the phone and he calls Qatari Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani. This would be a cousin of Tamim, to refinance the building. And the reason he calls Hamad bin Jassim is because at the time he's the former prime minister of Qatar, but at the time he was the manager of Qatar's $250 billion sovereign wealth fund. And so one of the meetings that Kushner holds is with this guy. He agrees to invest $500 million into the building. The deal ultimately falls through because the Kushners fail to raise the rest of the funding that they need to pay off the loan. And the reason that they failed to raise the rest of the money is because these other investors are skeptical that they're not all going to get arrested for conflict of interest because Donald Trump was just elected president at this point. This is December 2016. They're having this meeting. So Tom Barrack tells the Washington Post that he tried to use his Qatar connection to help Kushner in the 666 property. And when he does that, he says it just can. Kushner's move to the White House just about completely chills the market. Basically, the fact that Trump was coming into the White House, nobody wanted to touch Jared Kushner. Everyone's like, we're not going to help you because we don't want, we're going to get arrested if we even talk to you about any of this stuff. Just because of the perception of a conflict of interest, despite the fact that the Kushner companies has nothing to do with Donald Trump. And really, even though this was a favor, like making the phone calls was a favor, nobody's going to invest unless it's there's a business deal here, right? So of course, this is all presented by the Mueller report. This all is tied into the Mueller report as nefarious, and they're like, this is all part of the corruption of Donald Trump. This is all spun up as all the ways that Tom Barrack was, quote unquote, a bad guy. But let's now back out a little bit and get back to the Saudis, because we have, before we get to the Saudis, let's back up and go to 2010 and go to Miramax. So Miramax was a company that was created by the Weinsteins, made a bunch of movies. And I can go to this article. This is an article from the Los Angeles Times from January 2017, right before Trump entered office. It says, who are Trump's friends? One is Thomas Barrack, a Californian who could shape his views in the Middle East. It says Thomas J. Barrack Jr. drew worldwide attention for bailing out Michael Jackson when the singer's Neverland Ranch was on the brink of foreclosure. A couple of years later, Barrack's purchase of Miramax Studios with actor Rob Lowe and other partners vaulted him into the Hollywood elite. Barrack was chairman of Miramax for 6 years. Now Barrack's close friendship with Donald Trump has made him one of the most influential Californians in the inner circle of the president-elect. Trump put Barrack in charge of planning his January 20th inauguration. So I want to scroll down, though, to what... And so here's the quote. He says, I've always felt sympathy for Donald because it's very hard for him to have a friend, this is Barbara A. Rez, who was Trump's chief of construction in the 1980s, recalled that Barrack was one of Trump's few genuine friends. Quote, I always felt sympathy for Donald because it's very hard for him to have a friend. She said, everyone who surrounds him wants to have a piece of him. I mean, I think most of us can look at it from the outside and understand what she means when she says that. Everyone wants something from Donald Trump. The friendship gave Barrack a prominent role at the Republican National Convention in July. On the night Trump accepted the presidential nomination, Barrack was the last speaker before the candidate's daughter, Ivanka, took the stage. He told the audience that Trump, quote, played me like a Steinway piano in the Plaza Hotel deal. Left unmentioned was that Barrack's boss got a good price, nearly $410 million, while Trump went so deep into debt on that deal and others that he soon lost the hotel in a bankruptcy settlement. And then if we scroll down, I want to get to the quote from Rob Lowe. The quote was about Leonardo DiCaprio. Here it is. Okay. So Barrack's biggest Hollywood play was Miramax. He and Lowe were on holiday in a boat, on a boat in Sardinia when Barrack called Ron Tudor, the construction magnate, and asked about joining forces to buy the studio from Disney. They believed that they could make money by minimizing future filmmaking and maximizing sales from the studio's film library to Netflix and other outlets. With partners from Qatar, the trio formed an investment group that bought Miramax for $610 million. Barrack largely avoided the trappings of Hollywood. Others in his position, Lowe said, would have rushed to, quote, make Leonardo DiCaprio's passion project about sub-Saharan Africa. Tom kept his eye on the ball, Lowe said. Barrack said the group made a solid return last year when it sold the studio for an undisclosed amount to investors in Qatar. Yeah, that was 2016. So 2016, they ended up, after running the place for the Miramax for 6 years, Barrack sold all of his interests to his Qatari partners. Now the Qataris just own Miramax outright. And this is something that's really important, because this goes back to what Donald Trump has always said about Tom Barrack. What Donald Trump's always said about Tom Barrack is that he can see the future in ways that nobody else can. He has a vision for how things are going to evolve, and he can anticipate change long before others do. And so, as it notes right there, the play with Miramax, which was at the time a very successful Hollywood studio, right? The play was not to make movies. That was not the play. In fact, Barrack chopped up and sold off all of the filmmaking parts of Miramax. The only thing they were interested in was the library, which I think was like 750 movies. And it was because in 2010, he could see it. Remember, 2010, I think we were just getting the Netflix boxes, like at the gas station or like the 7-Eleven, where you would go up and you'd swipe your credit card and you'd actually get a physical DVD from Netflix, right? Netflix already had the online offer where they would mail you a DVD, but you could also now go to the gas station and physically rent one from the grocery store or whatever out of these vending machines. And so Tom Barrack saw that was the future. The future was people paying for movies at their home. Like it's basically cutting out the video store, the Blockbuster, and just doing direct to consumer for videos. And so he said, we're going to focus on licensing these films to platforms like Netflix. And then, of course, 6 years later, 2016, that was evident that was the future. Netflix then goes online, and then you can just press a button and watch the movie from, your iPad or phone or computer or whatever. But that was the focus. He avoided the trappings of Hollywood. He didn't fall into the bullshit. He didn't go make Leonardo DiCaprio's passion project. He just focused on the plan, and the plan was licensing the library and not getting into the filmmaking business. And then looking at the Weinstein Company, it was with similar eyes. It's like, how do we make money off of this? We got to get rid of the Weinsteins. That project, that thing falls through, but that just kind of goes to show this guy's vision. He has vision when it comes to this is what the future is. The future is direct to home streaming. Now, jump ahead to that interview that we watched at the beginning, the cold open. That was the first foreign investment initiative, which was dubbed by MBS as the Davos from the desert. And that really pissed off the World Economic Forum because they saw it as a huge slight to them. They saw it as something that it's like, this is an insult to us. And it was meant as an insult to them, even though a lot of those guys were invited to the investment forum. But it is what it is. Okay, so how does Tom Barrack get to? And I'm going to try to honor like the 90-minute block here and get out of here as soon as we can. So this might be we might just do a part 2 on Tom Barrack, which is going to be what happens to him in the Biden administration, and then what happens, and then of course the second Trump administration, which is still unfolding right now. But so he has a relationship with MBZ. He has a Mohammed bin Zayed of the UAE. The UAE, he leverages that relationship to understand that where is the balance of power in Saudi Arabia? Because come 2014, when Mohammed bin Salman becomes his father's chief advisor, that's when he starts building up a network. He's trying to build up his Rolodex of contacts because he's piecing together in his head Vision 2030, which he ends up pitching to Barack Obama in April 2016 when he joins his father. Now, Barack Obama invites them because they want to talk about the Iran nuclear deal. And the Saudis aren't really interested in that. Like instead of King Salman speaking, it's MBS who speaks. At that point, he's the defense minister, but he's basically pitching Vision 2030. And Barack Obama looks around the room and laughs him out of the room. He's like, "Why are we talking about this? Why are you wasting my time?" And that, of course, pisses off MBS, because he wasn't being taken seriously. Who does take him seriously though is Tom Barrack. And the reason Tom Barrack takes him seriously is because of Youssef Al-Otaiba. Now, Youssef Al-Otaiba is the ambassador from the UAE to America. He's close friends with the Saudis. He sees what MBS is, and he recognizes that MBS is going to be a big deal. And it's MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed, who at the time is he's now the leader of the UAE, but at the time he's the emir of Abu Dhabi. So he's the emir of a city versus the entire country. But MBZ and Youssef Al-Otaiba tell Tom Barrack, you need to let Donald Trump know, because Donald Trump at that point is going to run for president. But they were in contact with them, it appears, as early as maybe even 2015, certainly 2016 during the campaign. But what was being explained to Donald Trump was the real power in Saudi Arabia is MBS. Because at the time, everybody in DC recognized that Mohammed bin Naif was the person that they should be talking to. Mohammed bin Naif, who's this guy right here, he was appointed as the crown prince April 25th, April 2015 by King Salman. So he's made the crown prince until June 21st, 2017, when there was basically a coup by Mohammed bin Salman. But he is a CIA shill. He was involved in Saudi intelligence basically most of his life. And when he becomes crown prince, the CIA kind of breathes a sigh of relief that their guy is the next in line. And everybody in DC, everybody in the Republican Party, they're all telling Trump, this is the guy that you should be listening to. This is the guy that we're going to be friends with. And the Emiratis, that would be MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed, Youssef Al-Otaiba, the ambassador to the United States from the UAE, Tom Barrack, and Jared Kushner, the four of them. Because remember, Jared Kushner is meeting with the Qataris at the time and other Arabs, talking about getting investment to bail out from the 666 building, right? To make sure that they come out from being upside down in that mortgage. So they're talking directly. Now, Kushner, Barrack, MBZ, and Youssef Al-Otaiba all tell Trump, it's not Mohammed bin Naif. It's not MBN that you need to be focused on. It's MBS. This is the guy who's going to be the crown prince. This is the guy who's going to be the future of Saudi Arabia if he has the right support behind him. Okay. if he has the right support behind him. So after Trump gets elected in 2016, Yusuf Al-Otaiba puts Jared Kushner in direct contact with MBS. They start texting each other on WhatsApp. The State Department finds out, flips out, and says, "You can't do that. You need to go through us." Even though this guy is just a defense minister, if you're going to be part of the administration, Jared, you can't be doing this on your own. You got to go through official channels. Okay, sorry. They keep talking. And then MBS then travels to the United States in March of 2017 and meets with Trump. And that would be right here. March 14th, 2017. Okay, and then here's the Hill. Let's just see what the Hill has. Well, wait a minute. We're going to rip the Hill apart tomorrow on Daily. But that's not the... I was looking for the one. Here it is. The Saudi royal visits Trump. This is March 17, 2017. Remember, this is 2 months before the sword dance. So the Atlantic Council is writing this, probably not really understanding the relationship that's actually going on right here. And it says, MBS, who is in charge of all Saudi economic portfolios and is a businessman who owns many companies, seeks to establish a sovereign wealth fund, a pillar of Vision 2030. This could possibly be the largest SWF sovereign wealth fund in the world, worth $2 trillion. Depending on the sale of 5% of Saudi oil company Aramco's shares, the reception MBS received in Washington sent a signal that the Trump administration has given the deputy crown prince carte blanche to discuss all economic, political, military, and security portfolios, as he has arguably become the kingdom's first decision maker. At the top of the agenda in Washington, Trump and MBS discussed countering Iran's destabilizing regional activities and exploring steps across a broad range of political, military, social, security, economic, cultural, and social dimensions to further strengthen U.S. Saudi strategic relations, according to a White House statement. So they don't really grasp the gravity of what's happening here. They do note the fact that he is he's the defense minister, but he's also like one of the deputy crown princes. He's a deputy crown prince. But what's really, really interesting in all of this is that it wasn't Tom Barrack who reached out to the Saudis. It was MBS who reached out to Tom Barrack. And the reason that MBS reached out to Tom Barrack, and this was probably 2015, 2014, it's because he was looking to establish contacts in the West to legitimize him, because people who were going to take his Vision 2030 seriously, who weren't going to laugh him out of the room. And so when he reached out to his friends in the UAE, that would be MBZ and Yusuf Al-Otaiba, they said, oh, well, if you want to talk to somebody in America who understands us, who understands the Arabs, there's only one guy, and that one guy is Tom Barrack. So you need to go talk to Tom Barrack. And of course, the benefit on top of that was that Tom Barrack very much understood sovereign wealth funds, because he had done so many deals with the various sovereign wealth funds in Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Not only do you have the UAE sovereign wealth fund, but you also have the Abu Dhabi sovereign wealth fund. I think it's called Maguda. It has a weird name. It has a very, very strange name. But interestingly enough, it's actually MBS who reaches out to him and says, I want to talk about this. And then he was asked in that cold open video, he was asked, are you going to try to mediate the conflict between Qatar and Saudi Arabia? And he says, no, like, that's not my job. I'm not involved in any of this stuff. Like I'm just a friend of Donald Trump. He was speaking purely as a businessman in that video. Things have obviously changed now, because now he is very much a part of the administration and he is a diplomat. And that is a very, very important aspect of this. So I want to finish this episode with, because I think we probably will do a part 2 on Tom Barrack eventually. But I want to finish this episode with this clip. This is a 12-minute clip. It's very relevant. This is more relevant to what, I'm kind of breaking one of my rules here by bringing up something that's relevant to the current zeitgeist. But just given what's happening this week, I just think this, in this moment in time, I think this is a really relevant clip. This is Mario Nawfal interviewing Tom Barrack 2 months ago. And the question, of course, is like, does Syria trust Israel? And they're really talking about al-Shara, the guy who came and visited Trump last week, Jelani, the president of Syria. And just listen to what Tom Barrack says, because he runs through kind of the whole Middle East here.
Do they trust each other's intention, though? So that when you say, because when there were clashes between the government supporters, I think there were Sunni supporters with the Druze in the north, Israel got involved and struck inside Damascus. I think it was one of the headquarters, government headquarters, in support of the Druze. So when you talk to the Syrian president, does he trust Israel's intentions? Does he believe that Israel wants peace in Syria? Or is there some, either himself or within his government, that think that Israel wants to sow civil unrest in Syria to keep the country weak? I know many in the Arab world do believe that as well.
I can only give you my impression, my point of view, right? You have to have, you ask him that question, he'll give you the answer. Let me give you my impression. Is no, he doesn't trust their intentions. Nobody trusts their intentions, right? What's going on in Gaza makes the rest of the Arab world totally freaked out. Because no matter how you look at it, after October 7th, the world for Israel has changed. Their notion of what their mandate is and what our borders and boundaries and lines has changed. So I think it's safe to say in Israel's mind, these lines that were created by Sykes-Picot are meaningless. They will go where they want, when they want, and do what they want to protect the Israelis and their border to make sure on October 7th never happens again. Full stop there. El-Shara is a pragmatist. So he's looking what Israel did in coming across those lines, stated purpose to protect the Druze, nervous about El-Shara's military moving down the M5, the main road from Damascus to El-Suwaida is in the south, taking out those convoys and then going to Damascus as kind of a little teaser saying, by the way, just so you know how vulnerable you are, if you don't listen to us, we can not only take out your defense building, we can take out the palace.
And what he's referring to is, you remember the clip where the Syrian newscaster is like sitting at her desk in the intersection, like in a downtown city of Damascus is behind her, and all of a sudden the Ministry of Defense building blows up and like falls to the ground because it got bombed by Israel. That's what he's referring to.
Pragmatically now saying, I hear you. We have two roads. He's a warrior. Are you going to go to battle with Israel? Not a good idea. Hasn't fared well for anybody. And you have America as an ally to Israel. Can he go to the Abraham Accords? No way. He has a fundamentalist backing of Sunni fundamentalists who, like in Lebanon, right? When you mention the word Israel to a lot of factions in Lebanon, they freak out. I have the same discussion with them. I said, guys, get over it. It's Jurassic Park. You either talk to him today or you're going to talk to him in 3 years from now or 5 years from now. Dialogue is all that matters. So El-Shara is running to a dialogue. We've now had 2 meetings, historic meetings. They haven't talked for 30 years. And I have to tell you, it blew my mind. We brought them to Paris, and the French have been very helpful to us in that, neither one trusting each other and not having any chemistry. First meeting was 3.5 hours. They were so good with each other, not agreeing with each other, but engaging in those first steps of body chemistry to see, can we get to a place where we can agree on 1 or 2 things? And they did. And that then led to a subsequent meeting 3 weeks later, which got to the next step. So El-Shara is leaning in, saying, I have to appease all my neighbors. I have Israel on one side. I have Turkey on the other. I have the Gulf countries who have expectations of me also, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. I have Egypt, which is a 10,000-pound gorilla, which also has interests. I have Jordan. I have Iraq going to elections and in dismay themselves that also has a huge population of Kurds. And I'm trying to give everything to everybody. It's a monumentally difficult task for him. So I tell everybody that criticizes me, which they do, by the way, I take criticism from all factions equally. I'm an equally accepting criticism receiver. I say, great. You don't like the president's view of taking sanctions off of these guys. You don't like us trying to support them. You don't like me personally trying to mediate a peace or a stand down or a security agreement. Give me plan B. I still have energy. I've got the relationships. I'm happy to adapt. I'm happy to run to the president and say, by the way, we're on the wrong road, Secretary Rubio. I have a brilliant plan B. Let's run. Not one. There's no plan B. Plan B is chaos and a return to worse than what the Assad regime was. So this whole march of the Abraham Accords, which was brilliant, right? I mean, Jared Kushner, when you think about what Jared Kushner and the president did in the first term, and by the way, I told them at the time, because part of what I got in trouble for was introducing them to the same Gulf states that are now the savior to the region. Because the idea was we have to run to some alignment with Israel. Well,
I just want to interject here. What I got in trouble for doing was introducing them to the same Gulf states that have now become the savior to the world. We're talking about 2015 here is when he introduced them. 2015, maybe 2016, but probably 2015. Okay. He introduces them to the Emiratis, to the Qataris, to the Saudis. And then the Biden administration in July of 2021 indicts Tom Barrack for 9 felonies for lobbying for as an unregistered agent for a foreign government. That's what they charge him for. And so we'll get into all that maybe in part 2 of Tom Barrack, which we're not going to do immediately. We'll do that in the future. But I just want to point out the significant, why is this guy significant? Because of that line right there. I got in trouble for introducing Donald Trump to the same Gulf Arab states that are now the savior of the world 10 years later.
It's easier for small countries that have a monarchy, right? Saudi Arabia is not a small country. It's harder for them. So they need to take their time getting it. But MBS is brilliant, young, inspirational. For Tamim, if you had 400 or 500,000 Qataris, they're well educated, they've had alignment with the West, they understand Iran, Israel. MBZ ran to it, right? MBZ has a small population. He has a very wise focus on the entire region. So all of a sudden you have these threads running back to Israel, which also are supporting everybody else. We have these skirmishes in Sudan and Somalia and Terra. I mean, everybody's reaching in because you have to take all these threads to create a tapestry, and it takes time. But that's what's happening. So there's no plan B for Syria. We have to support this young man and his team and supply him with the resources to be able to be inclusive, to bring these minorities in, to hold people accountable and responsible, to train his people, and to allow the people on the street to feel a difference.
To have a life after decades of civil war. I want to ask you another question that a lot of people in Lebanon and Syria think about is, as I said, Israel's intentions and the whole concept of a greater Israel. You've sat down with Prime Minister Netanyahu. You've also sat down with President On. How significant is that concern when it comes to the negotiations? Because this is a point that Hezbollah makes. Hezbollah is like, look, if we give up our weapons, no one will stand up to Israel if they want to enter Lebanon in the future. And then,
all right, this is really important. I want to play this whole clip because listen to what Tom Barrack says about Hezbollah. He actually defends Hezbollah here, and he explains Hezbollah in actually the same way that I've explained Hezbollah. And it's very encouraging to hear somebody who's his age, who's Lebanese, who's spent much of his life in the Middle East, talk about Hezbollah this way. It is whatever the word is, exonerating, whatever, affirming.
And the counter argument to that is like, Israel's intention is for peace, and if Hezbollah does not exist in Lebanon, then there is no reason for war in Lebanon. What is your message to the Lebanese people about those two different viewpoints? Because that same concern exists in Syria as well.
So this is my personal view. How great is the concern of that happening? Zero.
Okay, so that's a big
Israel
statement.
being parasitic to either Syria or Lebanon, or the idea that Israel is really interested in keeping everybody off balance so that they can have more control and command, in my humble opinion, just as an individual, is ludicrous. And I've spent more time with all of them probably than anybody. It doesn't exist. That's not what's happening. After October 7th, everything changed for the Israelis. It's just not what they're thinking of. Now, when we talk about Hezbollah, and again, I think it's worthwhile if we can stop here and talk about Hezbollah. What is the problem with Hezbollah? The Shia population in Lebanon today, 30%, 40%, I don't know what it is. You know, right? Nobody can give you accurate numbers, but Shias are Lebanese. And they're as much Lebanese as Maronites or Sunnis or Druze or any other faction. Hezbollah in Lebanon is a political party. It does a great job in supplying all the municipal components to its southern community. And from the 80s, it was born out of necessity to protect and harness whatever wrongdoings were coming from the Israelis and secondarily the Palestinians.
He's referring to the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon, which began in 1981. They offered to come in and exterminate the Palestinians, which was Yasser Arafat and the PLO had taken refuge in southern Lebanon. And so Yasser Arafat being Sunni and these Lebanese being Shia, the IDF offered to come in and take care of the problem for them. They said, oh yeah, come in, like, sure, like, better you than us. We don't have to explain it to our people then why we're going after them. And so the IDF comes in and doesn't leave for 18 years. They refuse to leave. They start building settlements. They start, starts to look a lot like the West Bank and Gaza in southern Lebanon. So that's why Hezbollah was created, as a political movement to peacefully expel the IDF and Israelis from southern Lebanon, and then eventually it becomes a militant group, and that's the one that we know today. But it's at its core, it is a political group, and that's what he's going to explain here.
It then got into another mode, which was the military aspect, and the political aspect started to be confused by the West. And as we know, the military aspect was being funded by Iran. So over time, what happened is America and other Western countries looked and said, there's no difference. Hezbollah is Hezbollah. It's an Iranian proxy. It's a foreign terrorist organization, and it has to go. We, America, funding Lebanon. By the way, America loves Lebanon. And people who criticize me, and I'm happy for the criticism, I'm here for only one reason, is my heart, my soul, my family's heart and soul is Lebanese. My ability to express it is American. Because America gave me the gift to come from nothing to something. And what we here have to do is, it's your generation that's going to change things. It's not the Jurassic Park generation that's been in control here for 50 years. With massive corruption, people freak out when I say that. There's nobody in Lebanon who doesn't think this place hasn't been corrupt for 5 decades. Of course it is. We have $110 billion missing. You have $60 billion out of a central bank that just vanishes. You have the highest electricity in the world. You have a central government that gives you nothing. There's no water, there's no electricity, there's no power. A laugh is the only communal thing that's there. And yet you have this dedication to the beautiful Lebanese history, and people in Beirut prosper. But Hezbollah itself is a part of the Lebanese world. So you can't just say we want to disarm Hezbollah.
Listen, I want every red-blooded American to listen to what he says right here, and I want you to think really hard about first principles. I know we're past time, but this is important. I want you to think really hard about first principles and whether you are a moral relativist or whether you are a first principles person, meaning that whatever you believe in your heart, you believe no matter what the circumstances and you think are universally applicable, or if what you believe changes on a case-by-case basis depending on identity politics. Listen to what he says.
Everybody's armed. You go into any car, everybody's carrying a .357 Magnum. Most people have AK-47s or 50 caliber machine guns at home. I mean, this is not an environment where you're going to disarm small arms. And disarming is not really the issue. The issue is Hezbollah is looking and saying, we are.
He talks about the weapons. Every single person in Lebanon owns a gun. 50 caliber. How many of us are allowed to own 50 calibers? None of us, right? And the demand that these people all be disarmed, despite the fact that they've lived under violence for decades and their government, even their own government, has failed to protect them. But yet we want them to be disarmed because it will make us Americans feel safe 7,000 miles away. These people don't have the means to come attack us, even if they wanted to. And yet we're demanding that places like Lebanon totally disarm. That's what the State Department wants them to do. Totally disarm, collect all the guns. Why? Is that a first principles argument, or is that a identity politics, liberal, leftist argument that is shrouded in a Republican, conservative, neocon skin? And I would argue that it is.
The last stop for you against Israel and maybe Syria. And after El Suaida, that argument has become even more impactful, right? Because the Lebanese community is saying, wow, Israel just blew through the lines. They went all the way to Damascus. They might do that to us. And by the way, if they don't, we have a jihadist who may not love Shias that we're in constant dialogue with on this border boundary, and maybe that's going to happen there. They haven't fired a shot. Hezbollah hasn't fired a shot at Israel or anybody else since the signing of this November 2024 agreement. And in past history, the inside battle with Hezbollah, there's only been one or two. So,
in the history, there's only been one or two battles between Hezbollah and Israel. Interesting.
What's the answer? The answer is you have to have a better solution for the Shia population. Let's forget about Hezbollah for a minute.
Okay, yeah, that's the end of the clip, but fascinating interview. And obviously Tom Barrack's a very smart guy. Like, he knows what he's talking about. He talks about the Pico-Sykes agreement all the time. That was the 1919 Paris Treaty where Britain and France literally drew the lines of the Middle East at the end of World War I. He talks about that all the time. He talks about the failures of the national boundary lines in the Middle East. He talks about the failures of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And yeah, man, I find him to be a breath of fresh air. And he's very humble about the whole thing, much like Steve Wickoff. So, yes, and Gizmo's mom asked, Rubio is pushing for that. I don't know if it's Rubio specific. It's the U.S. State Department. The U.S. State Department, and it's Israel pushing for it. And the U.S. State Department basically just backs whatever Israel wants. And so Israel wants people in southern Lebanon to disarm, to turn all their weapons in. And the accusation is that anyone who owns a gun in southern Lebanon is potentially part of Hezbollah. And you could imagine if a foreign country designated MAGA as a terrorist organization, right? And then they said, okay, anyone living in this area that we know is a red area because historically you all voted for Donald Trump, you're MAGA. Anyone who owns a gun in this area is potentially part of this terrorist organization, MAGA. Turn your guns in because we're worried that you're going to attack us one day. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but 10 years from now, you might decide to attack us. That is what we, the United States, are doing in the Middle East to every community: Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, everywhere. Is it moral? Is it first principles? Is it right? Going into a foreign country and telling them how to live their lives. So just food for thought. But let's go ahead and hit the rants and hit the boost and get out of here. Because we went over. Boom Diggity, $100. Wow, Boom Diggity, thank you so much. That is very generous. God bless you. It says Boom Diggity says, thanks, Ghost, for all your great work. Amazing show as always. Appreciate you, Boom Diggity. Yeah, this hopefully what we're laying out here when we get into the really, really good topics like the Saudi purge and other events, and these characters start to come back into play. Tom Barrack may not be in play as much, but at least the things that he has done from the sidelines and during the first term, it's going to be very relevant and obvious that his efforts have paid dividends. Because remember, he's not part of the administration, not in the first term. And then let's see, we have, just want to double check Badlands boosts. While I do that, I will go ahead and hit this ad.
Before skincare went synthetic, people used something simple, something real: tallow. Grass-fed and finished beef tallow is packed with vitamins A, D, E, and K. Nutrients your skin actually knows what to do with. It locks in moisture, restores elasticity, and defends against winter dryness. No water, no preservatives, and no BS. Unlike plant oils or chemical creams, tallow mimics your skin's own structure. Elbows, hands, knees, post-shave, anywhere your skin's crying for real moisture. Perfect for gifting or keeping your own skin soft when the cold hits. Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Badlands for 15% off. Ancient care, modern truth.
Self-disclosure. All right, and the last ad is from our friend Jordan in Conscious Strength. Maha yourself with supplements that don't suck from Conscious Strength, founded by Badlands' very own Jordan Sather in 2019. Conscious Strength products are made in America and won't break your bank, unlike other online brands. Their lineup includes collagen for strengthening joints and hair, electrolytes to get rid of those cramps, greens powder that tastes good and mixes easily, Shilajit gummies, methylene blue, zeolite, and more. Flip the finger to pharma, be your own doctor, and get supplements that you can trust from Conscious Strength. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/strength to shop now. One more time, badlandsmedia.tv/strength. Link is in the description below. Thanks again, Jordan, for that. Yeah, everybody. So thanks again for joining us. This is chapter 37 in the books. We will be back next week with another episode to build on this layered storytelling. But this is going to be a big week. This is going to be a really, really big week. And a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, that we're going to talk about in hindsight, is related to the events that are going to unfold over the next 5 days. So it's very important to pay attention to that. And we will see you tomorrow on Badlands Daily. I'm going to raid us over to Culture of Change. Everybody, please hit the thumbs up, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.